first and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Thank you. And we don't have any public comments, so we're going to move on to requiring action.
And the first item under required action is to schedule an executive session to discuss personnel matters and also legal matters immediately following this meeting.
There's a motion. And a second.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Ms. Drury?
Yes.
Mr. Cronbaker? Yes. Ms. Williams? Mr. Reese?
Yes.
Okay, and the next item is consideration of football field light bids, something that Mike has been talking with us for the last 2+ years. He's been monitoring the status of the light poles on the football field. So I'll let Mike go ahead and explain it in greater detail about the situation we have and what we need to do.
Sure. I actually had a photo of our worst pole over there, and I ran off with that one. But if you guys have had a chance to look at them, because of our discussions, our southwest pole over there is, you can see it's got a very distinct lean to it. And I actually had Waters Engineering come out and shoot the elevations on this, and we have about a 2.5 foot lean one direction and 1.5 foot the other direction. And I've had more than one sleepless night thinking about that pole. And it all started because I started getting a lot of emails from some of these structures that had fallen all across the United States. And so we started having the poles tested, and our poles came back. The first year we had them tested, we had a fracture in that southwest pole. And it was, you couldn't even see it with the naked eye. It had been picked up with some of the technology that they had. But we did have it welded by a certified welder, and did all the other recommendations that they had. And at that time, they told us that they felt like we needed to start looking at a replacement system for our lighting. And to me, it's just gotten to the point that I don't know how that we can keep knowing it's the way it is and not address it. I did send out advertisements for bids, and we had 7 bidders who were interested. All of them RFQ, and we had 5 that responded. Excuse me, 3 that responded: Coke Electric and Coast to Coast and All Purpose Erectors. And you can see the numbers that I gave you there. We actually had 2 different lighting systems that were represented in the bidding. Originally, I had spec'd in there looking for a concrete pole system, and the more I talked about with the people about how that would be installed, and using just a rock aggregate as a backfill to keep the post stable, just didn't seem like it was going to be. We've already got one lean pole. I didn't want to put a brand new one in that lean pole. You know, they stand by that system, but to me, in our sandy soil, I was just a little bit concerned about it. And plus, they didn't come in with the best bid either. So All Purpose Erectors had the best numbers, and their lighting system, and I wrote in here the report that they gave me, they actually have a system that's guaranteed for 25 years that the light levels, right now we have approximately 35 foot candles is what we're looking at on our field right now, and we're looking at changing this system into 50 foot candles, which will be more lighting. And if the light diminishes in any way over a 25 year period, they replace it. If a bulb goes out, they replace it. Let me change it. If a bulb goes out to the point that it diminishes your coverage, they don't come just to replace one bulb. But if the levels go down below our 50 foot candles, then they actually come to replace the whole bulb. At the end of 25 years, they will come in and relamp and put in a whole new set of bulbs, and then it belongs to us as far as the maintenance on it. But for 25 years, they take care of all the maintenance, which is a pretty good deal.
They're going to relamp it at the end of 25 years, or only if there's a problem?
They will totally relamp it regardless at the end of 25 years, but all
Really?
the bulbs.
How do you determine the 50-foot candles?
We have a meter that we have used ourselves, and you just go out there in the middle of the night, hold it out there, and it'll give you a reading. It's very easy to use.
I figured it was.
And that's based on a 30-foot grid. So they've got a pretty good science to it. When the poles come out, they will already be aimed, computer pointed in the direction that they need to go. So,
Well, the recommendation is to accept all-purpose erectors' recommendation for demolition of $29,400 to remove the existing poles, and then also to install the new poles and lights for $243,600.
yes, sir.
That would be nice, wouldn't it, Lori?
Yeah, that would be better.
For a total of $273,000.
And we probably need to clarify that these are actually going to be 16, 17 expenditures. We're not going to pay this money out until after July 1, so technically you're kind of adopting a small part of the 16, 17 budget tonight. And the reason behind that is if we waited until the budget meeting, the 27th, those 3 weeks could jeopardize this being done by the first football game. So,
Along with that, we have a 6-pole system now. This is a 4-pole system. They inset just a little bit and have more lighting on each pole. And by doing that, we can accomplish a couple things, save money for one. And we can also, we're pretty sure we can make it happen this way, keeping our window very small. We can get the new posts and everything completely erected. And the only thing that would be lacking would be to unplug the old system, the electrical, and get it connected in. So we would have only like a week, 2-week time there that we would be kind of gambling with not having our lighting system in place for the first football game. So they're pretty sure that they can have all of it complete. We would wait and do the demo after the other sections are up. That way we're just not playing games with it. The only thing I can see that could kind of mess up that plan is if we got into some of the wiring that fed the system that we have now, and we do our dangest to get that all marked out with electronics to hand dig and locate those lines ahead of time, so we don't get into what we have.
Will you have to hook the electric up yourself, or will they be doing the electrical hookup?
They are going to, in our RFQ, we specified that they have a complete panel control system, and all we have to do is feed the circuitry, which is the power to the controls, and then they have to do all the controls. This system even has a monitoring system with it. If we want to use it, it's in their pricing, that wirelessly it'll report to them when a bulb goes out. And so they'll keep track of everything about it.
I make the motion that we approve this bid for the city.
All-purpose
All-purpose
erectors.
array.
Yes, sir.
That's all in concrete up, and that's turnkey.
Turnkey, yes, and I even just sent him a specific email just this week, making sure that he recognized this was a turnkey project, and we didn't do change orders.
I'll second.
There's a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
Mike, I'm just curious, is there any salvage value to any of the equipment or the poles that are being considered with the bid? Or I saw where they're actually keeping or taking care of the disposal.
Yes, sir.
I didn't know if that was discussed or not.
I actually started to, the first, when I went through and made up the RFQ, I actually had it set up to where that they would do disposal or we would do disposal. And with all the stuff I got going on this summer, I just didn't see how that they could lay them on the ground and we'd have to cut them up and haul them off. And probably for the dollar difference that they would allow us on that, I just didn't see that it would justify us.
Want to straighten that price down too.
It's very low. I was being
Anything
lazy
else?
right now.
Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Great, thanks, Mike.
Next, we have the consideration of approval of the 2016-2017 free and reduced lunch applications. Ms. Lori?
and we have to approve these every year. You approved, I'm not sure if it was in March or April, but you've already set your rates for next year. This application will reflect the meal charges, and we got them one day last week from the feds in order to approve this, but it has to be in the minutes that you did approve the free and reduced application. We're asking you to approve it tonight because that just gives us a few more days to get it to Brian Henson because he has to run thousands of copies of these.
So I move that we approve the free and reduced lunch applications.
Motion and second, any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries.
And lastly, under requiring action, we have consideration of purchase of a school van. And we really talked a lot about this, but we've had some minor issues that are going to potentially be some major issues with our vans that we have, the 3 vans that we utilize for our professional development activities. The ones that Chuck sends our people on, the ones that we use to travel throughout. But we were able to find a van through Mr. King at SCTC, through his, and I got a blank, I don't know the particular group. It's through the auto body.
Yeah, through our,
And-
they're the same group that finds our car giveaway when we buy the vehicle with the salvage title and they work on it all year. This same group found us this van.
Yes.
They're one of the major dealers in salvage.
Well, they do a great job
Yeah.
with that.
Yeah, that's why we're doing this.
We asked them to find us a van here a month or so ago. They did at a very reasonable cost. He found another one, basically a brand new van. This van is a 2016, 7,900 miles on it, $18,000. And since it's above that $15,000, we need to bring it to the board. This will come out of 15-16 budget. That's the reason why we need to go through with that. You can see there basically what this van has got as far as accessories on it is pretty well loaded. A new van like that would run $35,000, $36,000. We're getting it for $18,000.
And
Now,
this
the
is not a salvage title. This
No,
is-
it's
I
not.
wondered that.
No,
It's
it's a
not?
clean title.
Okay.
No.
So the warranty goes with it, it'll be more.
That's what I understand after talking with Chad. The
This
thing,
was on a lot
Yes.
in Houston where there was a flood, but this was not part of the flood, but the car rental place that it was at, they just turned in the whole lot, and this one had no damage to it. So clean title, full warranty.
Yeah, a lot of times they'll deal with rental places when they buy, and they will carry the warranty of it. So,
it's administration's recommendation to purchase the 2016 Chrysler Town and Country van for $18,000.
So maybe.
A motion? A second. Any other discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Okay, going into the work session items, we have the renewal of the APCO custodial services contract. We did this a few months ago with Aramark, and it's time again. This is the second year of contract with APCO, who we outsourced here a couple years ago. Mike, do you have some information to present for us from APCO? He's kind of our spokesperson tonight.
The year's over, the honeymoon's over, so now the marriage begins, I guess. We haven't had any issues at all with ADCO at all. I mean, there's been some things, just like we've normally had in the past with staffing, but as far as the company, as far as anything I've dealt with them on, they've done everything they said they would do.
From the bookkeeping end of things, but they've been great to work with.
They did, when we talked to them originally, said that they would have no more than a 3% increase annually, and they did request a 2.5% increase, which is in the neighborhood of $18,000 increase, which is still a lot less than Obamacare. I have had no problems at all. So it would be my recommendation that we continue on.
Is there any discussion with Mike? I mean, there's no vote on this, but is there any discussion, any concerns, comments?
I have a question. As far as our employees that transferred over, I mean, when I talk to them or see them at events, everything seems fine. So I guess where all the promises realized between with.
Part of the reason we get the 2.5% increase is because they really didn't have any turnover.
Okay.
So that
So that kind of.
That kind of speaks to how happy the employees are, because they would have, the agreement when we went into the contract is they had to take all of our staff at the hours that they had. But in the agreement, if some of our staff chose to leave, then they could replace what they thought was with a reasonable number of hours. They didn't have, I think they had 1 or 2 leaves, so that's the 2.5% increase, because what they had built in, they didn't realize the savings.
That's probably a better turnover than what we had put on it.
I saw Ricky Green, he said he was retiring.
We've had two, I think two.
I think we're
Yeah, somebody else told, yeah.
Yeah,
That's
Jim
all.
Hasty, I think is retired.
Yeah, but that wasn't because of the change.
No. I saw Rick the other day, giving us and he giving out.
Is, the new contract, is it going to specify that they keep our employees like it did in this previous one?
It's the
Because,
same contract, it's just a renewal.
I know, but it was my understanding that last year, they were only gonna be obligated for 1 year to keep the same staff that they had. Where they could not fire anyone or anything like that. Is that not right?
No, because, and that's why we're realizing the increases, because they didn't have anything through attrition, any savings through attrition, so they're still keeping the full staff and to go forward.
I mean, but they had to employ
Yes,
all of our staff.
yeah, we're making no changes to the number of hours or the number of staff assigned to the building with the renewal of the
So they
contract.
can't make those changes either.
No.
Well, surely they could if somebody doesn't perform
Well,
the
through
job.
attrition, well, they can fire somebody.
I mean,
Yeah, they can fire somebody, but just to cut hours, just to cut positions, I think is what you're asking. Because when they originally came in, they thought we were heavy on staff. So in the part of the contract, we agreed that if staff members left of their own accord, or if they were fired because they weren't performing, then they did not have to replace those positions as long as they could still cover the buildings. They didn't have a lot of turnover. I do believe they let 1 or 2 people go this year due to performance. But going into this, the same people keep their same hours and going forward. That was one of their requests that they had, was that something we could consider, like on our in-service days where we have staff come in? We do things a little bit differently than any other contract that they have, and I said, we could have saved you all some money had we been able to adjust those schedules, and Mike and I talked, and we said, no, we want it left. If that's what they were employed at before, well, that's what we want, continued coverage.
Make sure we keep our word to our employees.
Can we do anything about their uniforming?
Don't like maroon?
Not when we play blah, blah, blah.
Possible.
I've asked, but
I think they should wear red shirts.
I think they should too. I don't know if we have any time in that.
It was part of the contract.
No,
We
it
didn't
wasn't.
think of the uniform.
That's their
Who would have
business
thought?
colors.
They were fine.
At least they're not knowing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Or blue.
Well, I don't know.
Thank you, Mike.
We do give
Thank
them
you.
Bulldog shirts at the beginning of the year. I guess we could just make sure they wear those on Papa Bluff night.
Yeah.
That would help.
I have a special shirt.
Okay.
Yes, next we have the FY17 budget overview, something that Lori's doing 2 weeks prior to what we normally do, but to give you an overview of the expenditures and the revenues. So she has supplied you the information within the blue folder.
Yeah, we went ahead and did, we're trying to be paperless, but sometimes with this kind of stuff, you never know when you're trying to print. You really can't look at this volume of information on an iPad or on a phone. And sometimes we've heard that we will, have trouble with some of, different print drivers and things. So we just decided we'd go ahead and make a packet. You can keep this with you. You're not going to vote on anything other than what you already approved for the stadium lights for 16-17. You're not approving anything tonight. We're just going to go through. That gives you plenty of time to review the information, email or call me or Mr. Williams with questions, and then we'll come back together on the 27th and actually approve things and then make some final decisions on stuff that is in here. So first thing in the packet is we're going to go through revenues first. We won't have our assessed value. The counties are required to give that to us by July the 15th, so we always have to make assumptions with current and delinquent tax revenue, which is a big ticket item for us. I mean, we're heavy on local funding with our county monies. So we made some assumptions. Last year, we had a 4.5%, 4.2% growth in New Madrid and a 5% growth in Scott County in assessed value. And that was an anomaly. That is not the norm. We usually grow 1.8, 2%. It'll drop back down to 1.5. So the assumption in the growth for what we're looking at this evening, and if I have any updated information by the 27th, obviously, we will change any of this, both revenue and expenditure side. The current assumption for current taxes is 2% growth on assessed value, and then a collection rate of 97%, because that's what we realized the last 2 years is a 97% collection rate. Sales tax has been a big point of discussion in school districts in the state of Missouri for this entire school year. This time last year, they were projecting very high collection rates on sales tax. We are paid on the prior year's weighted average daily attendance times the dollar amount that is calculated by the state based on their sales tax collections. So last year at this time, they were shooting numbers that seemed unrealistic to everyone that was doing budgets. And if you went back and looked at notes from last year, you would see that I had a high end and a low end number, and we went with the low end number. I'm happy to report that we're coming in about $200,000 more than what was in our budget. So that was fantastic. It did pay on the high end. They are doing the same thing for next year, where it paid $940 for weighted average daily attendance this year, which again, phenomenal number for anybody that's been in school finance for any number of years. The projection for 16-17 is $977 per weighted average daily attendance. The finance gurus that you hear me talk about, Chris Straub, who's a retired superintendent and stayed in school finance as a liaison for school districts now for probably another 10 or 15 years. He doesn't think we'll ever see that number. So you can see on here, if we did collect on the high end, and we did this year, so it is possible. If we did collect on the high end, we could bring in another $81,000. I just went middle of the road. That $3.2 million is actually what we collected this year. It's pretty close to what we collected this year. It's a little bit more than the $940, but that $940 is the lowest it would pay. And you know, it's very hard for me to be optimistic on revenue. So
Do
this
you
is
know what it is this year? The WAD?
the weighted. No, we don't have our weighted average
You don't
daily
have it
attendance,
yet?
but it won't change much. It won't change much. The big factor will be just what the state pays.
What's the 977?
That is the state of Missouri takes the sales tax collections, and when they apply it to their formula for school districts, they calculate that dollar amount.
Got it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and they'll pay that dollar amount to every school district per their weighted average daily attendance from the prior year.
You're saying it's coming in higher in our current year though than 940.
Yes.
So that number's probably what, 950, somewhere like that? Okay. Thanks.
Financial institution tax, a lot of these, we're just making assumptions that they don't change a lot from year to year. And you can see, I'm not going to read every one of these, but you can see I put a current assumption line in on all of these, and they're either flat based on FY16 collections, or they're based on 3 to 5 year historical average. The big one in all of this, let me make sure before I get into the formula, I don't think there's anything else I really need to point out. Ask questions if you have. On the bottom of the second page, the 5191, the rental code, the dollar amount there, the reason that's such a large amount on rentals, keep in mind we have community members paying for our scoreboard, and that's their annual payments. That's the Pepsi payment plus the vendors that are paying for the scoreboard advertising. So that's where you're seeing that revenue come in on the budget. Prior year adjustment is at the top of the third page. When we presented money, or when we presented a budget adjustment this year for E-rate, for the projects that we were going to do, we never know what the timing is going to be on E-rate money, and they have a tendency to change the rules once we've applied for a project. So it looks like about $43,000 is going to cross over into the next fiscal year for projects that we've paid out for this year. When that happens, I can't show that as E-rate revenue. Missouri financing doesn't let me show it that way. It has to be shown as a prior period adjustment because it's a payment made on something that from the prior year. But that money projected there, that $43,000 is what we think will collect in E-rate money that we are due. Railroad and utility.
What was that this past year?
We had projected $150,000. This number may get higher. I'm down to the wire. I've got about 20 days to get some money in. We thought we would get 150,000. We've collected about 87,000 to this point, I think, is my final numbers. I haven't seen some of the checks yet, but they say they're coming. We did have a couple of projects with E-rate in the current year, and we'll talk about this when we do the cleanup on the 27th. We had a couple of projects where they always let us count our alternative school as a separate entity, because to us it is a separate entity. It's a separate building, and we roll the attendance back into the base schools. But it's a physical building that we do maintenance to and add upgrades to. And they made us change how we counted our attendance for that, so we lost some dollars. So we won't get the full funding that we thought. It's a nominal amount overall, and there was enough in the technology budget to cover. I think we're going to lose probably $12,000 to $15,000 in what we thought E-rate would fund. Now, Eddie has protested it, but that could be tied up in protest for 3 years. So, but he is working on it very diligently. Railroad utility tax. Again, making some assumptions, but we collected $955,000 on that this year, so I have nothing that indicates that there's any of those taxes are going away next year, so it should be a comparable amount. The formula this year is strange. I don't know how else to say it. It's always, there are people much smarter than me that know how to take and tweak numbers on this formula. And there's always winds up being a loophole. About every 5, 6, 7 years, there's a loophole that you can take advantage of until they close the loophole. 16, 17 is going to be one of those years. If you'll remember for this year, for 15, 16, that was the first year in 10 years probably that we no longer showed a proration factor. Up until 15, 16, you were collecting on the formula at 92% or 96% depending on the year. This year, it was mandated by legislature that it be at 100%. So then they had to reduce some of the other numbers. They changed the state adequacy target and they tweaked some other things. Well, going into 16, 17, with Senate Bill 586 and some of the changes with it that are effective July 1, and we won't lose any money with Senate Bill 586 until 17, 18. And what they project for us is losing $1.9 million on the formula. But we don't have to worry about that in 16, 17. But still there were some things on that Senate bill that go into effect July 1 that affected how the formula was calculated. So in the calculation of the formula, and we won't go through the whole 5 pages because I don't want to do it. But you start out with an average daily attendance that's based on what your students did either in the 16, 17 year current year, or you can go back 2 years. You can take the best of 3 years. We have a declining enrollment. We have had a declining enrollment for several years, so we always go back to prior years. That's our best average daily attendance number by the time you go through all the calculations. We never estimate because we're not a district that grows. So in the fall, when we started doing webinars and going to budget meetings and changes that were coming down the pike, and they already had some information on the Senate Bill 586, they started looking at the only way to make the formula whole again is they had to tweak numbers, and again, you still can't change it from 100%. So in addition to what your kids get in average daily attendance, just for being at school and whatever that calculates out to be, you put in your free and reduced count from January, a certain day in January. You put in your October special ed count, and you put, December special ed count, and you put in your October limited English proficient count. Those are all numbers that Lynn has to turn in. You put those into the formula, and if you have a high number of those kids, and making the assumption that any of those 3 categories will increase your cost of education, then you can collect a higher percentage based on those. But you take 25% of 75% of 60% of line 1A. What they did for the formula for 16, 17 to comply with Senate Bill 586 is they lowered those threshold amounts. They lowered those percentages. So when you put in your free and reduced numbers, or your special ed numbers, or your LEP numbers, and apply these lower percentages, it makes our ADA grow, even though I'm putting in a smaller number for what our kids actually attend at school. So the long story short is, for the first time in 20-plus years, we are going to estimate our average daily attendance every month and turn those numbers into DESI and be paid on current year numbers, because it generates about an extra $100,000 for us. They'll close that loophole after this year, because that was not something that somebody foresaw happening. They've based the formula money that they're estimating that they need for the state budget based on 35 to 40% of us continuing to get paid on 2 years back, because we have declining enrollment. But everybody in the state would be crazy not to. We did the numbers both ways, and if we can get $100,000 more out of the formula, we're going to do so. So the basic formula money reflected here shows 11.5 for actually the basic formula money, and then there's another line down on the next page for the classroom trust fund. Both of those assumptions were made for that. There's no downside to doing it this way. You are allowed, if we estimate our average daily attendance each month, and this is with me using the current year actual average daily attendance. The ladies that work on attendance here had that all but cleaned up. If anything, our number is going to go up and generate some more money for us. So really, that's the worst case scenario for us. If we project our average daily attendance every month, by the time we get to the spring, unless we've missed it by 15%, there is no penalty for doing this. And we're going to use real numbers every month, so we won't miss it. So there is really no downside. So we'll collect the extra money. Transportation is supposed to be steady. They still pay pennies on the dollars to what it actually costs us, but we should collect the full $224 next year. Classroom trust fund, you can see, is $1.2 million. So 11.5 and 1.2 is what that formula calculation will generate for us at the state level. Bless you. One thing about doing this meeting early, if you look on the next page, the 5332 codes are our vocational career and tech payments. We've not seen that final payment this year, and you all hear me say this every year. Vocational money is one of those things that sometimes you get surprised in June. Sometimes you get surprised for the good and you get more money, and sometimes you get a bad surprise. So we're making some assumptions here that we'll collect $390,000 in 16-17. Assuming that we get the $200,000 we're supposed to in June. If that doesn't come in on the 21st, we will update this number on the 27th. But I haven't had any indications, and Chad hasn't had any indications on his end that there's going to be a cut, and I think we would have heard so by now. We have all of the grant money in here. We have on Title I, 2A, 6B, IDEA, Focus, and we have all of our allocations, our initial allocations. Collaborative. We have all of our allocations, initial allocations on those. We have put those into the budget. We have looked at some year-end stuff. We will know more tomorrow. We have a meeting tomorrow to start trying to close out some of our federal grants, because again, this meeting is very early for us to be doing this much detail. But I have put in some rollover on Title I. There will be some rollover on 2A. 6B will not be rollover. It never does. We spend all of it and can spend more if we could have it. IDEA, which is your special ed funding, there's never any rollover. We spend every penny, and again, spend triple that amount if we can get the funding. So all of that has been built in. On the expenditure side of things for grants, we have done a match. The Perkins that is in here, the enhancement that is in here, are what Chad has been told he will be receiving for the year. So there really shouldn't be a lot of changes in anything between now and the 27th, short of us not getting some June monies in that we anticipate having. Food service, we just based on FY16. We'll talk a little, I have some more to say about food service, but we'll do that from the expenditure side. And most everything in here, other than what I've hit on specifically, are just historical numbers that stay pretty flat. There's no indication that there'll be any increase or decrease. And of course, everybody knows the budget is a working live document at all times. So if anything comes down the pipe over the summer that's going to change this, when we do our August tax levy meetings, and that's one of the times we'll update revenues. But I don't anticipate any surprises at all. I just feel better once we get that June payment on the 21st. So any questions on revenues?
How does the transportation?
They look at route miles, number of kids. They, again, plug that into, the state budget allows so much for transportation costs. They plug our numbers in to about a 6-page formula and calculates out what the annual amount should be. And then they start dividing that into just monthly payments. And then they are constantly adjusting the live data at the state level for corrections, because people will correct route miles when they start doing their ASDR, and they adjust it accordingly.
So theoretically, there's a whole state budget for transportation, and then it's divvied out by route miles, kind of per route mile per person kind of
Yes.
thing.
I haven't done the numbers in a couple of years, because it's been kind of a moving target. But historically, they pay us anywhere from 25 cents to 44 cents on the dollar for what we actually expend. Okay, the next stapled sheet that you have, we're going to talk about salaries and benefits last. So what this stapled sheet is any of your purchase services, your travel costs, your supply costs, your equipment costs, and our debt schedules. I have given you the 16-17 budget requested amount that has been either calculated by us at central office or turned in by the schools. And I've given you also a 15-16 budget column so that you can compare. I will hit highlights. You've got 3 weeks to look through this. If something stands out that I don't mention tonight, just like I said, shoot me an email or give me a call. There are various line items that are up or down, and we won't go through every one of those tonight, but I will hit the highlights on anything that are big, major changes in here. The first thing the board is probably aware, because I think you all were invited to the textbook meeting, is that we are including in the 16-17 budget a math textbook adoption for grades K through 12. The total cost of that adoption is $285,301. I put that on that very first line because that's where the elementary portion of that is plugged in. So as you go through the various pages and see the textbook amounts, they will add up to, the new math books will add up to the $285,301. There will be other textbook costs in the budget because there will be replacement textbooks, adult ed, adult health. The high school always has to replace copies, but you will know it's the textbook adoption. If you look at that first line, there's a 931 in the next to the last section. That's how we identify the new series adoption. So if it's a 931, it's, as you go through the budget, it's going to add up to that amount. The second line, this is the second year in a row that we have put into the budget a fairly significant amount of money, that's $6,405, is for another set of risers. We talked last year, our risers had gotten to the point that they were unsafe. Mike and them have to move them from building to building to building at the elementary level for the various programs that they do, and we had just worn them out. We purchased one set last year. We need a second set this year. You will see a large line item about 3/4 of the way down on page 1 there. General equipment of Matthews. You will see when you start actually comparing line items by line items, I'm not picking on Matthews here, there's just was one of the biggest numbers, so that was a good place for me to put the note. You will see at several of our elementary schools, we just have not bought tables, chairs, desks, those types of things in several years. We have depleted the stock at Central Supply that we have stored over the years. We had our auction this spring and sold a lot of that because it was just absolutely worn out. So some of this costs are projectors, some of it is, now if it was cafeteria tables, those are moved over to the food service cost because we have to show those as a food service cost. But they have just budgeted for various numbers of desks and tables and chairs. And so you will see some increases as we go down through here. And like I said, I'm not picking on Matthews. There's just happened to be the first one that caught my eye to show the difference. On the second page, the next thing that I wanted to be sure and point out, Something that we have done for years at the Career and Tech Center, because of the number of state and national competitions that they go to, we have budgeted for basically student competition travel. And they can spend upwards to 48 or 50,000 if DECA and the different groups actually, you know, you want your students to do well and you want them to go, but when they start qualifying and having to fly somewhere for national, it gets very expensive. So it just did, I think probably 10, 12 years ago, it was no longer feasible for students to try to raise that kind of money. So to have the programs and then for them to be successful, we came to the Board of Education and we said we need to put this in as a line item in the budget for it. Because just students aren't successful raising $50,000. So what we have run into now is that is starting to trickle down to various grade levels. And so what we have included in the budget for the board's consideration, you will see there on the second page, we've been putting small amounts in. If you look at that 7th and 8th grade student competition travel, the principal put in $3,100 a year for the 15-16 year. What we saw as we got into the school year is that there were still groups of kids at that level that were having to do a lot of fundraising. They were doing Simply Squirrel nights, or they were doing Pizza Inn nights, or car washes, or whatever, and we were still seeing a lot. So they put down this year, this is covering Science Olympiad, the Beta. Beta is one that gets very expensive very quickly, but all of the staff involved says, you know, this is great for our kids, it leads to good things. So they think it's a good project for them to be involved in, but it takes money to do so. The Science Olympiad, we had more participate this year, and they did really well. Well, the supplies for that and the travel for that just starts to add up. So the principals sat down, and at the 7th and 8th grade, when they put in all of those various things, it jumped to 13.6. So that was, but that's a realistic number. They have it down to, they're going to Hobby Lobby to spend $80 on something, and they are going to Lowe's to spend $100 on something, and they are paying transportation, this amount for the bus, and those types of things. So it's not, we didn't tell them, we're going to pay for your student travel, give us a number. We made them do everything else like they do everything else. It is zero based. Tell us why you need every dollar. So that was just what they came up with. So that is something we're asking for your consideration. You will see also on that page, again, not picking on one particular building, but you'll see a large general equipment increase for the 7th and 8th grade center. And that is a classroom of tables, some various furniture, and some other areas of the building. There is a big increase in, on the next page, on the high school campus, you will see supplies, band, senior high, and when Shannon and I looked into that, the majority of that, over half of that, is just repairs for instruments. And when I went back and looked at the history, it just kind of depends on the year. So that's a high number, it's a low number, this just happens to be a high number a year. The next section, technology, something that we are asking the board to consider, and it's included on that computer hardware, the $400,000 budget item there. We've had issues, and we've asked the board for 2 or 3 years running to approve $18,000 to $20,000 a year for laptop batteries. We spent $18,500 on laptop batteries this year, and they still just are not performing. They didn't stand up well in testing. They're not being able to utilize them in the classroom. We have Friday morning meetings every week here at this building, and Eddie comes in every 2 or 3 weeks to go through things in technology, and he came in about 2 months ago and said the laptops are just, we can keep throwing money at them, but that's all we're doing is throwing money at them. So what he has priced out and what the recommendation is of the administration is to go ahead and purchase Chromebooks to replace those laptops. In this number, there's 234 laptops that we need to replace, and then we're buying an extra, what's in the budget now, and we may take these out by the June 27th meeting. We still need to clarify some things. But there's also a set of 30 that can be used at the elementary level if we need to use a computer lab for classroom space. They're a very economical purchase. There are districts around us that use them. Eddie is very comfortable with the Chromebook being able to replace the laptops that we have in the district. Included in that cost is also 10 charging carts for those. They will work in the charging carts that we have for the iPads in the district, but there's no guarantee that we won't need them at the same time, so we went ahead and included the cost. Obviously, we won't buy the carts until we get going. If the Chromebooks are purchased, we'll get a couple of carts and then we'll see actually what we have to do. Again, if we don't need it, we won't buy it. But that is something new that's included. There is nothing new really on the project I learned. That is still just a replacement schedule. That would be purchasing 250 iPads, new cases for the freshmen, new cases for 5th and 6th grade, and then some replacement plugs and cords. We are to the point that we are not having to expand the actual technology structure of the building. So there's nothing in that. That's just a replacement schedule for iPads, cords, the power plugs, and then also cases. Because after the freshmen have had the iPads for 4 years and they get handed down, the cases are just, it's time to replace them. Yeah, they're not pretty. The technology budget does not include, on the expenditure side, any E-rate projects. We will have E-rate projects. They will be nominal for 16-17. We will come to the board like we did last year in the fall. When Eddie knows exactly what's been approved, we'll come to the board and say, this is what we are proposing, this is what the district match will be, and this is the revenue that we can collect. So we will do that later. But this bottom line does not have anything in E-rate. The next section, there is an increase on the software tech, and that is related to the iLearn program. And the assistant superintendents will need to speak to this if you have a lot of questions about the iLead team. But basically what's happened, you know, we've had software techs in the district for several years. That's what Michelle Gilmer and Abby Edwards are the ones, I almost said Abby Keeper, Abby Edwards do for us in the district. And they work directly with the training of the teachers and the staff on the use of the iPads and the students. They have taken teachers who have showed, I guess maybe excess interest in the program, and they have developed what they call an iLead team, both at high school level and the junior high level. So there was a request put into the budget this year to get those individuals, there's 12 at each building on the team, is that right? 12 at each building. What they have put in is a request to get them some extra equipment as part of their role in iLead, because they're kind of branching out, and then one person on the iLead team then can branch out and work with a smaller group of teachers in training. So that $20,000 in there is to get either MacBooks or a larger memory iPad that will be left up to the team members to decide what best meets the needs for what the group is trying to do, plus some applications that they need in order to train the teachers. So that's what that $20,000 in there. There's $16,000 in there for equipment. There's $4,000 in there for apps. I will tell you that is a number that has been cut simply because we have some other big items in there for the team to actually. That's something that you'll see, I guess, reoccurring if the board is willing to do that. Because we cut probably about $15,000 off of that budget for what was actually requested for the teams to function. We just thought that was one area that we couldn't show that much for growth. But we did put in enough, like I said, they can't do the MacBooks and the higher gigabyte. They were wanting 128 gigabyte iPads. So at least this will get them started on their way if it's approved. Nothing on the next few pages. Again, on anything that is Title 1, 2A, 6B, Special Ed, we have matched off in this section. If the grant is paying for purchase service supply equipment, then you will see the expenditure show up here. The majority of all of those grants now pay for salaries and benefits, so you won't see as much on the expenditure side as you see revenue on the revenue side of things, because it's built into the big numbers for salaries and benefits. You will see some increases, I didn't note this, but you will see some increases in career and tech. Career and tech is one of those areas that fluctuates. A lot of it depends on what program they're focusing on for the year, what program they can get grant money for the year. So if they can get enhancement for culinary arts in this particular school year, then you'll see an increase in culinary art expenditures at the local level because there's always a match that goes along with enhancement. One of the bigger increases you will see is in welding, and if you will remember, we approved a while back the expansion of that welding program. I'm not sure what month I was going to look that up, I apologize, but we just did that in the spring, and they added five bays, is that what they're called? Five bays?
Loading bay.
So they've pretty much doubled the welding space. So you will see a big increase in their supply money because to furnish those 5 extra bays with the gas and the metal and everything that they need, the cost went up. On the next page, I want to, in the 1,400 codes, I did make a note about this. I always like to talk about this. There's a line item that's called Student Activities Master, and it's a $500,000 line item, $500,000 on that line. That is the master account where we plug in a dollar amount to cover the expenditures of every activity club in the district. So there is a revenue match on the other side of $610,000 because historically those groups bring in, and scholarships, they bring in about $610,000, expenditures amount to about $500,000. So that's just where we earmark that money. There's no, on the next page, there's no adult ed and literacy because that's a program that we stopped for 15-16. We just went into September of 15-16. On the 1660 and the 1662 codes, that's adult ed and health. Now those are not completely self-funded programs, but there is revenue on the other side that offsets some of the costs associated with running those programs. I've made note in here on, there's a tuition other districts and tuition handicap. Just sometimes those are things that we don't think to talk about that we actually have to pay as a district. The first one, tuition other districts, our services are provided by various other school districts or various other groups, but their parents reside within our district. And so we have to pay tuition to those. And this year it was to the tune of about $60,000. Tuition handicap works the same way, except it's special services provided to students at other establishments because they're not, we can't service them here, but the parents reside. And this was a good year for that. It usually runs $38,000 to $50,000, so we just put those in based on historical numbers. And then truancy court is in here at $20,000. That's what our contract costs for truancy court. And then we have $2,500 in under truancy as well, and that's the mileage and for our truant officer where he turns in his mileage to us. On the 2214 codes, that is the professional development code. They have put back in 15-16 school year and going forward on the formula. You are required to spend 1% of your formula money on actually you're required to spend 75% of 1% of your formula money on professional development. Based on the assumptions that we made on the formula, we will have to spend about $117,000. $49,000 of that is not reflected on the expenditure side of things that you're looking at here because it will go out to, that's how we pay our curriculum stipends. And that's how we pay for our substitute teachers for the days that students are out. That teachers are out for professional development days. We can use that money to cover for those substitutes. We are required to put a certain amount of it into actual travel, which you see that $46,699. That's how we pay for our tuition reimbursement. That is something that when Chuck meets with the teacher committee, they plan out what that money will be spent on, and those are items that are in the plan on how that money will be spent. If you go on down under, just because it was the first place it shows up in the budget, Board of Ed liability insurance, I've made a note. Music, property and liability insurance had about a 2% increase is what we're projecting. We won't know those numbers till December. That's when the renewal comes in. We have included in that our basic coverage and the $15 million umbrella package that we have purchased for the last several years. the annual estimated cost for just the insurance, property and liability insurance side of it is $269,000. In the benefits that we will talk about, music also does our work comp. There's $180,000 built into the benefits for work comp. And just so I don't forget, it has nothing to do with music, but also built into the benefits side is unemployment for about $30,000 is what we spend annually on unemployment. You will see there under the 2320 is the big amount for Title IIA district travel. That's a grant that Chuck manages for the district. We do pay salaries and benefits out of that, but that is one grant that requires a certain percentage be spent on actual professional development of your staff. Normally that number runs $45,000 to $48,000 when he does his calculation. We are replacing a full-time teacher that currently is paid by 2A with a 550-hour position next school year. That is a tremendous amount of savings on salaries. So the reason you see that jump from $47,000 in 15-16 to $89,000 on that particular line is because we've taken that excess salary and benefit amount, and that's where we've plugged it into. Now the intent is we won't spend that $89,000 this year, but keep in mind on all of the federal dollars we have to show the full allocation in the budget. That is something that we will roll over for the plan for that grant as we go on. So we have no intent of spending $89,000, but we have to show the full allocation there. And because it will not be in salary and benefits, you're seeing it on this side of the budget. The next page you'll see at the top, you'll see a code that's called Central Supply Stock Items, and it's $90,000. That's a master account that we use to buy the paper bid that you just approved, the office supply bid that you'll approve next Tuesday, those types of things. We have to break those costs down by individual buildings so that we can show how much Lee Hunter spent or how much Matthew spent or how much high school spent, because that's something that's required by the state. But we are allowed to tie just a master budget account and link those others to it. So the cost will show up at another place in the budget, but $90,000 is the estimated cost that we anticipate spending. The next section is building and grounds. You will see some big increases there. Utilities, we increased gas 7% based on electric based on the history that we've had for the last 3 years, so we've increased it by 7%. Gas we based back on 14-15 usage. I just was not brave enough to put the 15-16 numbers in there because they were so low because we just had a mild winter. Utilities is one of those things that where we pay the monthly bills, but you don't always remember to go back and look at that budgeted line item, and that has caught up with us before. So we based gas on still a very moderate winter, not a bad winter, but not as mild as we had this year. But we did go ahead and show an increase in electricity. As far as large projects, we've already talked about the stadium poles. That's the big. That's going to be a $287,000 project by the time it's all said and done. And those are pretty early numbers. Mike has worked on those numbers. So when everything is done and the new poles are up and we have paid everybody and we've done the boring and anything else that has to be done, that's the cost, $287,000. Mike has in his budget, again for your consideration, the continuation of upgrading door locks, door replacement. You see door locks are in for $10,000, door replacement for $72,000. Our buildings are just at a point that we have to do tuck pointing. Mike and them did look at doing the tuck pointing on their own, and it didn't work out economically, so we're putting in again $30,000 for them to hire somebody to do that. You see the stadium poles there at $287,000. Continuing to work on access controls and cameras, safety upgrades. Those hit 6 different buildings. That $46,000 are upgrades to 6 different buildings in the district. Band shell windows for $12,000, girls' gym windows for $49,000. I will tell you that we will do, and Mike has gone, and I have gotten this wrong every time. On the girls' gym, there is either either the bottom level or the upper level has to be done. He will do those in the fall. We can't avoid doing those. The second half he won't do until the spring. If it is a bad year, whatever level is not at its worst could actually be pushed off the year, but we have the full amount in there for consideration, but the second half of that won't be done until the spring, in case the money's needed somewhere else. Continuation with the quad canopies will be $40,000 by the time the project is done. There are handicap rail and ramp upgrades that need to be done at the football stadium. That's $40,000. In the package, in the budget is a green energy package, and we are still looking at whether we are going to do that. There are some questions. We met with our Con Edison group yesterday. That's the group that we worked with back in 2011 for our energy savings project. This was our third and final year where they come in and do their annual assessment of our utility bills as part of that contract from back then. And when we met with them yesterday, they brought up some questions on this green energy package that we went ahead and left it in the budget because this meeting just took place yesterday at 9 a.m. But we have some questions for the city to make sure that that return on investment really is going to come back to us in 20 months. So the numbers in the budget now, we may take it out before the 27th. But the reason we're starting with junior high is junior high has the majority of that building is electric. And so this package that they put in actually controls your voltage so you don't have any spikes. It helps you maintain the life of your equipment better, which is important to that building because it is high on electrical equipment. And then you start seeing a reduction in your rates because you don't have all of those spikes. So the estimate we have from the vendor is 20-month return on investment. But like I said, Con Edison's going to do some research on it for us and get back with us. There's an extra $5,000 above what he normally budgets for landscaping, and that's for some improvements on the high school campus. We have a large open area over there that just kind of makes it too easy to access, so they have an idea to put some fast-growing trees in there to kind of block off some of that open area. Southeast Elementary needs a new boiler. That's $35,000. There are some upgrades for the soccer field, and Mr. Crumpector may can speak to this better than I can. I think we are working with the city. There's some grant money involved. We may or may not have some costs. At this point, Mike thinks our part of the cost will be about $6,000. Again, we will take that out if it's not necessary. Transportation, the bottom part of the bus garage over there is just absolutely starting to rust out, so we have to put some money in to repair that. That's estimated at $6,000. And roofing is in every year because we have a roofing replacement schedule, and $210,000 is the estimate for this 16-17 school year. You'll see the custodial outsourcing. I didn't think until Mike mentioned in his presentation to put in there that it was a 2.5% increase that did amount to about $18,000. But again, I think that's been a good partnership. And remember, by paying for them, we were saying, we had a $500,000 line item that we're going to have to put into health insurance if we did not outsource. So it's still a very feasible partnership for us to have. On the next page, you'll see another master account. I'd just like for you to understand what those are. That's the copier lease. Again, we have to show the cost associated at each individual building, but we do a master account, and that $108,000 is based on the new contract that was approved last month for Shepherd's. In the next section under safety, CPI, professional development, that is, and Lynn will have to explain actually the details of that, but we've done that program for several years now. We are to a point that in 16-17 people have to complete retraining. This is, what I know about it is a process on how to safely restrain kids in a bad situation. And we will have to train a new trainer because Mr. Harold was one of our trainers, so there's an increased cost in that. That is one thing that we will look at. We talked about that 1% money that we have to spend for professional development. We may, because when we get down to the bottom line of this, we're looking at a deficit for next year, but we have good balances. But all of those CPI costs are something that could be used, that 1% money could be used for. We don't have to have these as a separate line item training. We put that in because that was put in place as a safety procedure, and we wanted to track our safety cost. But if we need to at year end, we can move that $10,000 over under 1% and pay for that professional development piece to not actually to be part of the 117 that we're required to spend. We do have 60,000 in for school resource officers. Now, that's not expanding the program at all. That's using the existing staff that we have. And we've included in there, as we have for many, many years, $6,000 so that we will continue to receive DARE services for our elementary students from Sikeston DPS. Transportation, you will see an increase, that very bottom line item, you will see an increase on transportation repair, and that's just the cost of doing business with an aging fleet. And then it's also the cost of doing business apparently with the new fleet. Because every time on anything that was, any school bus that was made after 2008, once they reach 75 to 100,000 miles, we have to pay out about $6,000 for an emissions upgrade. So, you know, old fleet or new fleet, they're getting us on repairs. We did include in the bus, in the budget buses, we may have to cut other areas if the board is not comfortable with the deficit that we present. But Tom and Ron and I have sat down on many occasions. I've told the board we've looked at leasing them. If we lease, we're paying a large amount of interest. We don't think that's really being very responsible with taxpayer money to pay interest when we have large balances and we can buy the buses outright. We've looked at buying new buses. We've looked at buying older buses. We have been very fortunate in buying the few-year-old buses because basically the kinks have been worked out. So Ron has priced 2 buses. They're 2014 Bluebirds. He is very adamant that we continue with Bluebirds. He can get those for about $75,000 a piece. So we have put in 2 buses at $150,000. And where we normally tell you at the budget meeting this time of year that we won't buy buses till spring, and we'll make sure that all of the other money is coming into place. We wait on that live payment. Our bus fleet is to the point that we need to buy those buses. We're actually going to ask the board to approve the purchase of 2 buses at the June 27th meeting so we can get them ordered and try to have them by the first day of school. So this
Were
is,
you also talking about increasing the amount of buses that we were going to purchase annually so that
we are.
we wouldn't be so far behind?
So, since we need these 2 so desperately, we're going to ask to purchase these in the fall of the year. We are going to wait and come back to the board after we negotiate our gasoline contract. We're in a consortium for gasoline purchases and transportation, and that contract will be renegotiated in December. So we will see, we've gone on the low end. If you look on the actual gasoline line item, we have put in $110,000. If you'll recall, just as recently as 3 years ago, we were spending $160,000 and $180,000 in gasoline. If we are able to negotiate a good contract and all of the other numbers district-wide work well, we will come back to the board in December or January and ask for a budget adjustment to buy a 3rd bus. So our intent is to buy 3 out of this year if possible. The necessity is to buy 2 out of this year. And do it early on. Food service, the Aramark rates, you know, the food service bid is a 5-year bid, and when all the companies bid those, they have to give you their pricing for 5 years, the way we do. And remember, we are on a cost per meal basis. So we pay Aramark a flat amount for every meal they serve, and then they have a a la carte adjuster in there that they convert into meals to pay that. You will see that the 16-17 amount is down compared to 15-16, even though their rates went up 2.1%. And that is because for the 15-16 school year, they were down 200 meals a day on the high school campus. So because we pay per meal, the costs are projected to be less for next year. As everything is in the budget this year, when you look at what we will generate in state money, which is only $14,000 a year, but it's pretty steady. And what we should get on federal payments and what we, based on historical numbers on what we collected locally, even with the number of meals being down, the local revenue that we collected, food service is actually sitting in at about a $72,000 profit for the 16-17 school year when you look at revenue versus expenditures. That may or may not hold. If their participation level goes up at the high school again, they have some ideas that on things they're going to try. If that goes up, our costs will go up on the expenditure side, but the money that we bring in from local and federal will go up as well, so they should offset each other. But the reason I'm worried about that profit actually staying in there, and keep in mind, we can have 2 or 3 years in the black in food services and still be in the red, because we had such a bad early 2000s that when you look at the broad range at the state level, we're still showing the red. I have put in $45,000 for equipment. It's another big year for equipment. We need cafeteria tables, we need cafeteria chairs, we need milk boxes. We have written a grant for milk boxes, but we're not going to hear until September whether we actually get reimbursed, and we need to buy them before school starts. So there are things like that in this $45,000. What's not in it is we need a new lift on the truck. We think we can limp along with it one more year. If any big piece of equipment goes down in any of the kitchens, it doesn't take long to start eating up a $72,000 profit. We thought we were going to have to put into the budget, I'm just going to tell you now, we thought we would have to put in a new freezer at the high school. We thought we were going to have to come to the board in December for a new freezer, and maintenance was able to, once again, put a Band-Aid on it, and we've gone on. I don't think this is real good, but the second semester we did well, and so Mike had decided that we could take it out of the 16-17 budget, and they think we're okay. When we do that project, and it's inevitable that it will have to be done sometime within the next 2 to 5 years, it's going to be a $75,000 or $80,000 price tag to it. When we do that, we need to, the freezer side is the problem, but we'll need to redo the walk-in side as well. So the reason I'm not too excited about food service actually making money is because any given month we can come back and we will tell you you're going to have $72,000 to the good, and we're going to ask you to spend $78,000. But that's just the nature of the beast with food service. But that $45,000 is getting us everything that we need to start school day one. The next section under what's called community services, I just wanted to point out, and this is a good thing, supplies, volunteer meals. That's where we pay for our grandmother program that they have at the elementary school. That's our in-kind contribution for that program. Our buses pick them up and take them to the schools, and then they take them back home. So we provide transportation and we provide meals. And we also have always told our police and fire that they could come in, to come in and visit with the kids at lunch, and we would pick up the tab for those meals. And I think the big reason that we see such an increase, because that $10,500 is actually what we paid out for 15-16. There were a couple events where we invited large groups of police to come in for specific events, so that showed some increase. But our kindergarten in the classroom breakfast has raised that number, because before the grandmothers didn't necessarily eat, and now they eat every day with the kids. But that's a good thing because it encourages the kids to eat, so it's money well spent. But I did want to point out that there is an increase. And then you will see from there down, the rest of the page is our debt payments, and it is just a glorious thing to see those small payments on those GO bonds after that approval of that 0.99% interest rate. So that drops significantly. So that is purchase services, supplies, equipment, and debt in a nutshell. Again, there is a lot of information here. There are a lot of line items. You're going to see ups and downs. Please don't hesitate to ask me questions on anything that's in here, but I have hit all of the highlights. One thing with food services that is included in this budget, and we will need to make a point for it to be in the minutes on the June 27th meeting. What is included in this is the assumption that we want to continue on with that Provision 2 breakfast program at the kindergarten level, where all students eat breakfast free. It is served in the classroom. We lose about $10,000 of food service revenue on that because you're not collecting on those paid students. But for what we continue to hear from the staff on the reduced number of complaints or early morning visits to the nurse's office and their ability to focus in the classroom, we think that's money, again, well spent. So included in this is the assumption that we will continue. This was our 3rd year doing that, so it's time we will have to put into the state over the summer to renew that Provision 2. So that assumption is in there. you can still do a community eligibility program where you can take and basically expand, nobody having to pay for any meal, breakfast or lunch, to all of our buildings except the high school. Our high school never qualifies. And district-wide, we lose too much money anyway, but we did do those numbers. When you do that, you no longer collect free and reduced applications, you don't collect money. It is just absolutely, we lose $8,000 to $9,000 to $10,000 a building at the elementary level, and it gets closer to $12,000, $14,000, $15,000 for our secondary schools. So that just is not a feasible option for us. As much as we would like to be able to do that, it is just, again, we have some profit built into the food service program, but overall, it's in the red. And we think we'll need that money at some point, so that's just not a feasible option for the board to consider, in my opinion. But I do think the provision to the $10,000 or $12,000 loss that we do there is money, again, well spent and worth the program. So that's that section in, telling very, probably long to you all, but very quick summary for me for everything that goes into it. So the next page is just an overall budget summary.
Quick question. Can we get this in Excel electronically?
Yeah, we're gonna put it on after tonight, yes. This was,
And is there a way to add the prior year too? So you had like a 3-year roll?
you want 14-15 in there?
Yeah.
Okay, what I'll give you is 14-15 actual instead of the budget, so you can see what was spent,
Perfect.
okay?
And then, do you have 15-16 actual?
It's still a moving target. You can have it by the 27th, but we still got tons of stuff to pay out for this year.
All right.
So that's why you just have to budget it now.
Yep.
Okay, so the one-page summary sheet that is in here is similar to what we look at all the time. When we look at what we know about revenue and the assumptions that we are making for the June 21st payment, which is that we should collect about 2.5 to 2.6 million on that day. When we look at that, we're looking at revenues coming in about $200,000 more than what we had projected for the overall budget, and 99% of that is because Prop C actually paid us a higher amount. When we look at the expenditure side of things, again, with several unknowns at this point as far as final utility bills and those types of things, but we have a ballpark, and we're assuming we will pay out all of the encumbrances that are on the books. We're going to come in on the expenditure side probably just at $500,000 under what we budgeted for. So we gained $500,000 on expenditures that we didn't spend. We collected $200,000 more than we thought we would have. So our deficit will come in for 15-16, even with the debt added. Because remember, over the year, we started out with about a $213,000 deficit. That was what was presented to the board this time last year at the budget meeting. But then we came in and paid off early the debt service payment, which was money well spent in the long run. But that increased our deficit by about $750,000. Because of the unexpended items that we're anticipating in expenditures and the extra revenue that we collected, we think we're actually going to come in at about $213,000 deficit for 15-16. So that's not bad. So we think we will start out somewhere around July 1 when we'll have about $15 million in balances. And a very small fraction of that now, about $500,000 of that is all that is in debt service, because you paid off so much of your debt service. We paid out of our accounts and dropped those balances down from $1 million. So of that $15 million, most of that can be used for operating expenditures. So no new formula here as far as looking at salaries and benefits. We put in, we have all the payrolls in as of today, with the exception of the last bi-weekly that we will pay the last week in June, and we have projected that out. So actual salaries for 15-16 are going to come in at $18,598,000. We have done, as we do every year, looked at our retirees and our resignations. Outgoing salaries are usually higher than incoming salaries. By the time you look at all of that, the savings from retirees is, the actual number is $254,480, but we have gone on the conservative end for budgeting purposes and said we will save $200,000. And then we have some new positions to talk about. Our elementary class size, we're looking at adding 2 new elementary positions. Those are actually 2 new positions to offset those class sizes so that we didn't wind up with 30, 31, and 32 in some of those 3rd and 4th grade classrooms. A focus assistant at Matthews, now that will be fully funded by focus money, but again, we have to show it as a new position for the board to approve. We have that position. You've heard Alicia in her monthly presentations talk about Chandra Perkins and what she does at Southeast. That is the same type of position that they are wanting to add to Matthews. So that's will be a new position that's included in the budget for you all to approve. We are looking at adding 2 550-hour teachers to expand the elementary ISS program. We currently have a full-time certified teacher at kindergarten that takes ISS classroom. We have 4th graders that go to 5th and 6th grade to the ISS classroom there, but this will actually be an expansion so it can service more kids, and we plan on funding that with 550-hour retired teachers. And then, and I'm sorry that doesn't say kindergarten personal aid. In kindergarten, and some of the incoming students that are coming in, we know there will be a need for an additional personal aid at the kindergarten center. And then also included in that is we are not currently replacing a speech path that retired. There is the possibility that we will put in a speech language pathologist assistant, which we have one of those in place now. And so that will be, that's a fairly significant savings reflected in. Then co-curricular changes, there was, the committee met, I think probably back around Easter break, and sat down and went through things. What is recommended to the board in this budget is an added football assistant coach for 7th and 8th grade. And then you can see various other areas where the percentages were increased, and those were increased to match area schools and how they pay. The cost of those changes calculated out to be about $18,000. Move to right on the salary schedule is where people go and get advanced career hours and actually move to the right on the salary schedule, and that works out to $1,700 or $1,800. And we're just, I don't know that 15 people are moving. That's just on average about what does move. So that always increased the cost. So that takes us from current salaries of $18,598,000 and actually ending with a flat amount because we had such a large savings when you looked at, we have a lot of newbies coming in for a lot of high-end salaries going out. So we're looking at $18,573,000 for projected salaries before any raises. We did the same type of process for your benefits. We took the 15-16 on where we're going to end the year for salaries and benefits, and that's our starting point. The savings from the retiree positions at the top, you can see is a savings of almost $32,000. Then we added back in what the costs of retirement or Social Security or Medicare applicable to the new position would cost. That's $57,780. We have the savings on the lower insurance premium, which was a $200,000 savings. We have a cost associated, again, an increase with those people moving to the right because you're paying more retirement, you're paying more Medicare on them. And then we're looking at, with the new positions and the look-back period, who qualified for transportation to come on, we're looking at a minimum of 10 new people to come onto the insurance plan. So that would be, for those 10 positions, that would cost about $59,000. So there's your new projected benefit amount. And then the purchase services, supplies, equipment, and debt that is listed there, that $10.1 million is what we just went through. If you look at the top of this stapled page, under budget requested, you will see that number, that $10 million.
That number's down from the budget number 15, 16, correct?
Because of the debt.
Oh, right.
We had a $1 million debt payment in there last year because of the early payoff. So that's why that looks like, I got real excited. And then it was just the debt. When it was all said and done. So you're looking at total expenditures at this point, and I don't foresee a lot of increases. I mean, I think we've given you revenues on a fairly conservative side and expenditures on the high end of things. So between now and the 27th, I don't anticipate a lot of savings unless I hear from you all that you all have discussed and what cuts taken out. I don't see us adding a whole lot more. I think we've covered everything we possibly can. So total expenditures are anticipated to just over 34 million. Revenues are estimated at 33.5, so that's a deficit of $494,000. That would bring our ending balance down to 14.5, assuming that we are correct on where we start for the year. And then there are some various raise scenarios at the bottom. Tom and I met the last week of school with the Salary and Welfare Committee. We went through, basically what we do in that meeting is we go through whatever's happening with revenues, what we anticipate happening with revenues, whether they're up or down, or that things are going to be withheld, or used to, we talked about proration factor a lot, those types of things. So we kind of look at revenues in a nutshell, and then we go through exactly what I did in these sheets and say, we're going to have to replace stadium poles, and we don't have any choice but to buy 2 new buses. And all of these things are, are going to take down our balances. And we go through all of that, and then they sit down and look at what they want the board to consider. And we had a request before the meeting this year to look at, and I was going to look up what year, I think 9-10 was the last year that the state funded the career ladder, fully funded it. Because before career ladder was, you had 3 different levels just like we do now. And you could, the max level, if you were on stage 3 and put in the number of hours and completed your career ladder plan, you made $5,000 for doing that. And the state paid $2,500 and the district funded $2,500 because that was the agreement with the state, is that you matched 50% of whatever level they were on. So when the state funding for career ladder went away, the Board of Education at that time voted to continue to cut the number of hours required for the career ladder plan in half and continue to pay it at 50%. And that's been a number that's always been in our salaries and benefits, is 50% funding of that career ladder, with teachers doing half the hours. So the committee asked that we look at what it would cost to fully fund the career ladder. And so we did that for them. And there are 167 participants on career ladder. That came in right at $382,000 is what it costs to salaries and benefits to go ahead and expand the hours and get the full 5,000 or the 1,500 or no 5,000, 3,000, and 1,500 are the levels to expand those back up to the full level. So there's 167 participants on the plan. Costs about $382,000 with the benefit side of things to fund that. So Tom and I lead, the committee made their recommendation, their vote, and they came back, and the information we got the next day was to ask for a step and 3% for all staff, and then to fully fund that career ladder. So the total cost to do that is that $1.3 million. So you'll see the deficit with that raise goes to $1.8 million, and that would take our balances down to 12.6. The administration has given you other scenarios to consider at the bottom there as possibilities. And again, we're not making any decisions tonight, so that's why we wanted to give you all the various scenarios.
Laura, can I ask you a question?
Mm-hmm.
So the, last year, we figured we were about 8% behind local when we wanted to get our salaries up 8% over the 2 or 3 years, however long it took us to do that. So we did 5% last year.
We're going to look at that.
Okay, you're going to look at that too?
Yeah, we're going to, that's the last.
And that was my
Thursday.
question, does career ladder go into those numbers or how we compare?
No,
Okay, so when we compare, we're only comparing base salary?
base salary, that's all you're looking at.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Now keep in mind, if you're a new teacher, you can't get on career ladder. You have to do 5 years.
Oh, yeah.
So-
Okay.
So what we were looking at last year was trying to build the front end of that to make that step one attractive.
Yeah.
So career ladder doesn't have an effect on that because you have to put your 5 years of service in. And that's why we've always been good in the middle, because we always paid more as we went across and we gave the step. And so the middle of our actual base salaries were always good. Our high end was always fantastic compared to other districts. Our low end is where we started to lag behind. But not only was that middle strong, but you also had career ladder on that as an option, so that made us attractive.
Well, it's amazing when you look at your report, which you'll get next week, the number of hours, extra hours with children.
and I'm not speaking for the teacher committee, but the reason this was posed was not just so 167 people in the district would get a raise, that the rest of the staff would not. Their point was, if you expand this program, then you expand the number of service hours that our students are going to get. Because you're not just getting more money, you gotta go back up to doubling the hours now. So that was the basis behind that.
If that's not sustainable, I guess that would be something in the future you could always go back to have, if it wasn't a sustainable thing.
It was,
That would be hard to do.
yeah, and it's a large number. Sometimes it's funny how things work out. If you look at what a step only on the bottom part of the sheet, if you look at a step only for all staff is 368,000, and that affects all 550 people. And the 382,000 to fully fund the career ladder only affects 167. So when you look at it that way, it's not one of the best options on the table. But again, you're getting a lot of service hours for your students by expanding that and keeping that, everybody has an opportunity to work toward being on career ladder. And with a bigger dollar amount, more may participate. If you'll keep in mind, one thing that we had happen, and it wasn't a lot, it was probably less than a dozen people, but we had people, when it went to halftime, they just quit writing plans because they needed the 5,000. And in order to still try to do halftime hours and only get $2,500 for it, they were still trying to work, somewhere else after school, so they just chose not to work career ladder plans. Not a large number, but we lost some good people not doing service hours with our students just from the sheer reason that they needed more money than what they were going to get on career ladder, and they could make more money going to Subway after school and doing that.
Can you
So-
rejoin once you quit? You can rejoin once you quit?
As long as you do a plan, right?
Okay.
But at the bottom you can see various scenarios, and these are the same things we always do. If you look at step only for all staff is 368,000. Let me say this, we didn't have an increase in the state of Missouri. Minimum wage did not go up in January, so we don't have to do that where we protect the integrity of the support staff salary schedule by adding an odd number of cents to it. So we're not giving you anything this year except a step for support and a step for certified and a percentage across the board raise is what we're looking at this bottom half. We don't have to do the dime or the 15 cents this year because minimum wage did not go up. So the step only cost $368,000. If that was the only thing you were to do, your deficit goes to $862,000, dropping your balances to 14.1. A step in one is $567,000. Takes you to just over $1 million deficit, takes your balances to 13.9. A step in two, $766,000 is the cost, it's a $1.2 million deficit, and that takes your balances to 13.7. And then a step in three costs $965,000, it takes your deficit to just under 1.5 million, and making the assumption that your ending balances would be 13.5. Now, I would never present a budget that was deficit to fund raises. So yes, we're looking at this as we're starting out with a $500,000 deficit, and then we're adding raises on top of this, and this is increasing your deficit. But remember about all the stuff that we talked about over here. Deficit spending is never a good plan, we know that. But we know that we have more in our reserves and that we need to spend some of that money down. So in your expenditures, you are looking at what, if we were to lose in 17-18 $1.9 million, then obviously we have to slow the brakes on some of the stuff we're doing. We want to be reasonable. I hope we don't lose funding somewhere else, that you get back to a point that you ever have to freeze salaries. But I hope we can plug forward like we did through the late 90s and the early 2000s, where you do a step and a reasonable increase to at least try to do some type of cost of living if the money side of things do get worse in 2 years as they anticipate. But keep in mind that in this year's budget, if we weren't having to do stadium poles, and you're not going to do those every year, it may be some other project next year. But if you weren't doing those, we would almost be balanced before we get any raises, because $287,000, you might as well say you're at $300,000 and we're at $500,000 deficit. The Chromebooks are in there at $100,000. We have $22,000 extra equipment in there that we're asking you to approve for software techs for the I-League teams. We've got $40,000 upgrades for handicap at the stadium that we really have no choice but to do this year, but that's not something that's going to reoccur. That we're always going to have general repairs, we're always going to have stuff come up, but when you go through and look at, this is not something we want to do, but if the situation were dire, we could not continue with some of the access controls and some of the upgrades that we're doing. There's $180,000 in new doors, new windows, cameras, and access controls. And if it were a year that you were having to look at $2 million in revenue loss, those are things that we would probably be saying, let's wait and see what happens and do those in the spring. So when Tom and I sat down and looked at everything, again, the buses are in this. We think with $15 million in the bank, we're telling you we need to buy buses. If we didn't have $15 million in the bank, and if we were looking at a $1.9 million loss in state formula money, then we would be saying, you know what, we'll just try it another year with the buses that we have. It's not going to be great, but we'll just see what we do. But when you look at all of those things that we have built in that could be considered one-time purchases, they total about $1.4 million. So in the years that we have sat in this room, for those of you that have been on the board for so many years, and we have had these very hard conversations, there is $1.4 million that we could cut out of this very quickly. And you're looking at worst case scenario with a step in 3% for all staff of a $1.4 million deficit, and if you go the route with a step in 3 and fully career ladder, you're at 1.8. So, and again, dropping your balances, worst case scenario to 12.6, and a comfortable position for us would be 7.5 to 8 million. Now, that doesn't do anything for us as far as using some of our balances to build, which has been discussed. The other thing that you have to keep in mind when you start deficit spending, and we're not the only district that's in this situation, we battened down the hatchet for years, and then we slowly started to come back out of it, and we've just been fortunate that revenues have held and expenditures have stayed on the low end side of things and stayed under budget. But now one thing we have to consider is we need to keep that $7.5 or $8 million as the lowest we can go and actually function as a district, because you don't want to get into a situation where you borrow money to make your payrolls. We're always going to have $200,000 to $300,000 in our budget for roofs, because obviously we have to keep roofs on our building. You're always going to have probably another $200,000 in repairs that are just necessary. Whether we are repairing buses or buying buses, you're going to have transportation costs that are going to be $300,000 and $400,000 a year that cannot be eliminated. You're looking at utilities increasing about 7%. You obviously have to keep property and liability costs. As long as we stay in music, we're fortunate that those costs are controlled at 2.5% and 3%. We are on the right path to control some of our benefit costs, I feel. But keep all of that in mind, that we've got to keep our food service contract, because you've got to feed the kids, you've got to have your custodians. So there are some things in the grand scheme of things that if the money situation gets too dire 2 or 3 years out, that we cannot cut. So deficit spending would not be ideal to practice for very many years in a row. But if it's a controlled spend, and as long as you can identify items that would still, you could still operate and maintain your buildings, and maybe not do some of the things that we are doing now and offset that deficit, then I'm comfortable with showing you those numbers. So don't think that this is irresponsible showing you a deficit of this amount. If you will remember, in 15-16, the deficit we projected was $213,000. Ironically, that looks to be exactly where we're going to end up, because we gained on both sides, even with the bigger debt service payments, so we're going to come out about there. But remember, this year, the only reason it looked that good on paper is because you had huge amounts of federal grant money that was crossing fiscal years. So what you actually adopted this year was a $1.1 million deficit if you weren't collecting $907,000 in federal dollars. And our intent this year is for that grant money. They say if we invoice tomorrow, we will get our money by June 30. So our intent is for that money not to cross years.
I had a question. So, to fully fund the career ladder is about It's 380.
382,000. It's 382,000 added to that 965.
So why then is the, if you look at the ending balance or projection, so if we went with their recommendation of step 3% and fully fund the career ladder, it has an ending balance of 12,664. Why is the one, so the only difference with the bottom one, step and 3%, is that we're not fully funding?
Is the math not right? We did this at 4 o'clock today.
Okay, good. I mean, because the
I think it's
ending
right.
balance is $900,000 dividend. It can't be that much, can it?
Yeah, let me see. Like I said, we were doing this at 4 o'clock.
Should be a $382,000.
It should be, that's what I'm getting at. I just think we need to make sure that math is right.
Yeah, we will. I will tell you the cost is right. I know the cost is right. The ending balance, we decided to add.
I really just wanted to make sure I wasn't missing something.
No, it should be the 15 million. And the 494. And then the 965. And I think we picked up the I think when we did it, we picked up the total.
I'm not so sure that you're not right. I think maybe you're,
I think it's 13,158. I will do these, when we go on to bigger and better things tonight, I will go through and update this and hand you on the.
See what I'm saying, though?
Yeah. Yeah, I think what happened is when they put the formula in this afternoon, because I added this to them at the last minute, this column to the right to look at the balances, I think their formula's picking up the 494 and that bottom line and the 1.3, so I think they doubled the 965. But I will double check it and we will reprint it. But basically, those are the options. Now, to address what Amy has said, we've included a 3% salary schedule. This is what, if you adopted the step and 3%, if you look at this, our base currently is 31,668. It would go to 32,618, which is a $950 increase for that step 1 level. We called Cape and we called Bluff. They have approved their raises. They both added 700, I don't know if they talked or if this is just a fluke, but Cape and Poplar Bluff both added $750 to their base. The Cape base went to 33,250, and Poplar Bluff's base step 1 went to 32,000. So with a step and a 3%, we would be coming in at 32,618, so we would be above Bluff and we would be $632 below Cape. So we're gaining ground. It's much better than the spread was last year.
Do you know what kind of percentages they're offering in raises?
They both worked out to around 2.4%.
Okay.
That was an average, because where we take and put the raise across the board and affect every cell on our salary schedule, they put dollar amounts in instead of applying a percentage. They took $750 and plugged $750 into everything, and so that made the percentage fluctuate. But I think Kelly said at Cape it was 2.4, and I think Bluff we did that and it was 2.4. I'm sure you will have a lot of questions. This is a lot to throw at you, but I do like this, although this was really tough on my staff to try to, we took 21 days off their work schedule to put numbers together. So they rallied and did a very good job. But I do like that you all have this information. You can absorb this information. You have, basically 3 weeks to get information from me. And I will be glad to answer any questions. Like I said, email, call me, whatever you need, and then we'll come back the 27th with any numbers that change. Hopefully, we will have very good news from the payments on the 21st, and we don't have to come in and we get lower numbers on the 21st, and we start with a lower starting balance, and there are some things in here we may tweak. But right now, this would be, if this were the 27th of the month and we actually get $2.5 million on the 21st, this would be the administration's recommended budget to the board.
Great.
Thanks for your
Any questions for Lori?
When do you think you'll be able to send that to us? And so-
Oh, we're gonna put it on tomorrow.
Oh, great, okay.
Yeah, it'll be on there tomorrow.
Thanks.
Any
And
other-
this will be on with updated. We'll figure out what's wrong with it on here.
Any other questions for Lori?
I'm always sorry.
A lot of information with Lori.
I'm sorry,
You
it takes so
and
much of your time.
the- No. You and the girls down there did a wonderful job with this. That was very
We are
thorough,
very
very good.
fortunate to have a fantastic staff.
Yeah, it's great. Outstanding job.
One
Appreciate
thing the board needs to consider on salaries, it's built in, so you will need to tell me if you do not want to do that. Is for 6, 7 years running now, we have given people that are on master's column, it freezes at 25, masters 16, masters and 32 freezes at step 30. So included in the salary numbers are those individuals on masters plus 16, masters plus 32 getting a step. We physically add that into their work record. So that gets them some more in addition to the percentage. So that is built in, so if you do not want to continue that process, that's something that you will need to tell me to take out on the 27th.
How many people does that really affect?
It affects about 7 people
Both those companies?
on certified, across the board. And I think maybe even a couple of them may have retired this year. So the number may be closer to 5, but I also may have some coming on. And then we also, also built into that is all of the support staff salary schedule freezes at 30 years, and we have 2 individuals that have been here 40-something years. So we ask you to give them that step as well. The hourly increment, which is 25 cents. So there's 2 people on support and about 7 or 8 on
It's a long
certified.
time of education,
It's a long time to be in, it is.
dedicated service. Okay, great, thank you. Next, I'm gonna go through some of the informational items, and then we have several here to recommend. And so what I'd like to do is go into exec session if we may, to go ahead and do the hiring. There are just some items here. One, Lori already mentioned about the special session dealing with the June 27th meeting at 4:30. I put down, as I do every year, the PN graduation is going to be the 30th of June at 7 at Cape First, if anyone's interested. I know Amy's been contacted. I don't know if Shannon has or not, but I put her down to go. So Shannon's going, and I'm going to that event. It's just a graduation, so it's a nice event. Did you get it? Yeah, we did get invitation this week, so I think.
Yesterday or the day before?
I also put in there a schedule so you have an understanding of what's taking place at the beginning of the year. I've got a new teacher orientation schedule that begins on the 9th for the meetings here in Sikeston. And on that 9th, I have listed down a lunch, which I'll invite all the board members to attend. That lunch is going to be at the alternative school, is where we tentatively plan to have that. In addition to that, I included a back-to-school schedule. And I wanted you to kind of get an idea of what our administrators have to cover with our teachers. I listed on the 12th, 15th, and 16th. Those items there, required topics, are items that the building administrators have to cover with the teachers and what they go through during those 2 days. The 3rd day is reserved then for work day. Some administrators go ahead and use half and half days. It kind of just depends on what the building wants to work with. But I wanted to throw that in there as well. And lastly on this, I wanted to include the meeting dates from June through December. I have down there, I listed everything as far as work session and including the meeting itself. I guess at this time, I kind of want to get your feeling for work sessions and what you're thinking about work sessions, and whether you want to continue with those or do you want to do those as needed. I'm looking for feedback.
As needed. I would prefer to get rid of them, but I think that's probably not good.
I don't see why we can't blend them, you know, similar to what we're doing tonight. Even if we had to have more meetings, you know, if we can't cover all that we need to in a meeting, substitute those nights that we're having the work session for an additional meeting. But have a blend of a work session with with me. We might just have a small amount of things to cover. Still take the same time overall,
You know, obviously as tonight, we needed to have an extra time for this discussion prior to going into, I think, and Lori, like I said, Lori did a great job presenting that, and now you have 3 weeks in order to go through that and to really review the information, review the numbers, which will help on the 27th meeting, I think.
But I think we kind of know when we're gonna have those.
We do. I would look at, I put down July, we'll meet as needed, as you were talking about earlier, Jim. We'll meet. Typically in the past, so historically, they did not meet in July. That was kind of a time where it did. August, we'll probably have to have a work session. September, October, sometimes there's not as much there. So I think we're gonna have to gauge it by month. We probably will have to come in and have some type of work session discussion prior to a board meeting on the Tuesday. So I'll leave that in as is. We'll just keep it as needed and we'll go from there. At this time, I would like to recommend that we go into exec session to discuss the mentioned items.
I would only say, Tom, I'm gonna recuse myself from part of the exec session, so I don't know if we're going to, if we want to cover the rest of the board meeting agenda real quick before we go into it.
I'll do it. Prior to doing that, I'll go into the rest of it.
One other thing before you do that, Tom, on the informational items, is the MSBA annual conference. Is anybody interested in going to that? I mean, I probably was the last one of the
Jim?
board to go to a state meeting,
Scott,
but
I would highly recommend going. I would like to
I
go.
wish we could get some interest, and I just wanted to say that, put it out there, but
It's,
it's September 29th through the 2nd of October.
I'm just, I think it's at Tantera.
Well,
It's at, yeah,
Yeah.
it's the same thing.
Yeah.
But the MSBA conferences and, these conferences they're very good. And it's
It's a
joint
good
with
opportunity
Massa.
to network and bring in some good ideas. You know, we started doing the electronic board meeting packets after we went to one of those and, you know, got rid of all the papers. We were getting binders of paper every month. And I don't know, there were some new things that we implemented after we went to some of those. And I think we're missing an opportunity.
I don't disagree. I believe the 13th is when it opens, 13th of June. I don't have my calendar in front of me, and I'm afraid to go off because I may mess it up, so I'm gonna leave it on there. I think it's the 13th is when it opens up. So if you're interested in doing that, contact Carrie and we'll get you signed up.
That's the 13th Monday, so.
Okay, it's Monday. Going through the board agenda for next Tuesday, just the usual recognition. We have the usual informational items down there listed. We do have board policy for consideration. I would recommend that you do review those, and I will review those more in depth and more detail on Tuesday. Okay, and I'll explain some of the changes on those. We do have down require an action to go into exec session simply because we may have some teachers again to hire. We have to go through and list the the A+ candidates for consideration. We have to do that and verify that in order for it to be approved, and the board has to approve that before the program to be approved. Mr. Crater is going to present the supplemental vision and orientation and mobility services. As is Laura's going to do an expenditure transfer, something that we have to do quite often during this time of year. Office supply bid, that is this time of year as well, and you can see the items that I marked down there and the total cost that we will be going towards with the office supply bid. The facility rental agreement, every year we're required to go through that and annually review that. It's going to be my recommendation to the board next Tuesday is to keep it as is. The policy, or excuse me, those rates were set 10, 12 years ago. However, I think they still apply to what we're currently doing.
Didn't we look at that pretty close last year?
We did,
I thought
and we looked at it a year before that too. We looked at those things and they're good.
Yeah.
They're very comparable.
I did have one question on the scoreboard rental. That's just to use the scoreboards because we eventually, I mean, our advertisers right now are our sponsors, but eventually you could sell advertising on those.
Yes.
Okay, but that's not an advertising rate, that's just a rental to use them, right?
Yes. I'm a
Yeah.
little lost when
Right.
you're talking,
Yeah.
are you
Well,
saying
it
that
just
with
seemed
these?
very cheap. the
Oh,
$150 rate.
okay.
I just wanted to make sure we weren't running,
What that would be, let me kind of explain that scoreboard.
mhm.
That would be like if I go to the junior high school and I want to use the scoreboard,
Okay.
I'm gonna be charged for it.
Okay.
Yeah, it just covers, that covers the wear and tear and the
Mhm.
electricity.
Charge the rental for the facility.
It's not.
Plus
It's
additional
not
items
advertising.
would be added,
That's what I was
I need
saying.
chairs, I need covering on the floor.
Yeah.
That could be charged to the
Okay.
person running the
Yeah,
facility.
I think that's great.
We also have on there the Project I Learn purchase, which Lori had mentioned about that, for the replacement iPads for our ninth grade students. We also have a non-tenured staff member that we need to approve, and that's simply because the person completed their credits and are certified now. So we need to go ahead and put them on the non-tenured teacher list, the staff list, in order to approve, and we'll go from there. We do have ratification of the bills. I already talked to Matt and Amy about that, as far as who is on that and what we need to do there. Then we have consent items. We have Lisa down there retiring, Lisa Vaughn. We have Eric Voorhees, and we also have Brent Taylor that recently turned in a resignation. We're working on that right now as far as replacing those particular people. The rest of it, we have surplus items down there. We have some books from kindergarten and Lee Hunter that we need to surplus, in addition to several handbooks. And those handbooks are listed down there on consent simply because they're limited if any change is made to those particular books. So, that's the monthly agenda for June. And I recommend that we go into exec session.
So moved.
Second.
Motion to adjourn and discussion. Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed, motion carries.
Yeah, me too.
John,
Are you seriously not? I was freezing my butt off. I had to go through, okay.
I got a cord, you got a bit right there.
I don't know. I'm guessing.
Rebecca, you still there?
We lose you?
No, I'm still here. Okay, good, good.
We secured a headquarter building it. Heather,
Where's the quote?
and it's available, $250 a month, but we have no air conditioning, we'll have to do something about the air conditioning.
You're freezing to death.
Blower store.
They said no,
Well, don't know where that came from.
but they have no air conditioning.
Yeah, that's the only problem.
That's a big one.
That's a big problem. But there's, she mentioned portable air conditioning, we had to check in and see what we do about it. We'd have to get it air conditioning. That's one reason we have to not that.
You don't need it, you don't need
Are you
it.
coming tomorrow?
So it's just something to talk about, see if we can work it
I
out.
wouldn't have.
If we don't have any other options.
You're more than welcome to
Yeah,
come.
well,
But
they're
I
looking
assumed-
in a lot of places
I
right
assumed
now,
you were
so
not
we
going to
haven't-
come.
I talked with Ashley about it, and I said, no, I'll go if you
I
want
got
me to
some.
go.
I'll just
And
need to go
no,
out.
she said it's this weekend, and she said,
We did, we got the baby.
he's already.
The baby is oriented.
She's an official student.
It hurts, and I saw her.
Yeah.
Schedule,